That's great. So that's really how the figures come about. I think there's a market for it. I haven't had anybody tell me it's a bad idea yet. And this is what happens when I got angry on the 12th of November when I was in the pub with my son-in-law saying, this is ridiculous. Why doesn't someone do this? And then we ended up launching it on the 29th of December. So it's a combination of me having time on my hands and getting angry and being in a pub, really. I think that's how we could say that it came about.
This is the People in Legal podcast. I'm your host, Chantal McNaught, and welcome to the Law and Beyond show, where we talk about everything that is the expanding legal universe, that is legal tech, innovation, automation, and compliance in academia. As your host, I also write a LinkedIn newsletter that has just had a rebrand, so I'm very excited to announce that it is now the fully innovative Luxury Lawyer, and you can find it by connecting with me on LinkedIn. Now, today's guest that I have today is Shaun Jardine, a leading authority on value-based pricing and the author of Ditch the Billable Hour and Ditch and Switch. Shaun is also the founder of Big Yellow Penguin, where he helps law firms move away from watching the clock and towards innovative pricing strategies. So you can understand why I jumped at the opportunity to have him on the show. He is also the creator of Declan AI, an AI-powered pricing assistant, and most recently, the founder of Legal Gigz. Known for his engaging and sometimes feathered presentation style, Shaun combines his decades of legal management experience with a mission to make the business of law more profitable and practical. Thanks for coming onto the show, Shaun.
Thank you so much. And I just want to tell your listeners, I've never described myself as feathered, and that was entirely your work there. But thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here.
We were just having a great conversation about the use of AI and that kind of thing. And I will have to admit that I did get a little bit of inspiration while I was playing around with AI on how I could make your bio compelling and give a bit of a more substance to Shaun, because we've had a couple of times where we've spoken, and I just think that you've got a really lovely presentation style, a very accessible way of delivering a lot of your communication pieces. And I think feathered is the right description.
I'll cope with feathered, yes.
Brilliant. So we've got you on the show because of you launching Legal Gigz. So congratulations, by the way. It's I think was one of the early people who posted a review or a testimonial of it, and I think that it was something, and I stand by those words. It should have been something that have existed on the internet years ago. And I know that you've talked about building a market map for legal events. For what's the market map for, and why is it necessary?
Okay, the why is probably the easiest bit to deal with, because I like you speak at events, and I was starting to look at, well, okay, middle of November, what's on next year? I ought to start looking at the up and coming conferences. And when I was doing that, I found 3 in London on the same day in June. And you then think, well, that's 3 legal conferences aimed about in-person legal conferences, not talking webinars. And I thought, well, that's really bad for exhibitors. Which ones do I go to? It's bad for delegates. Well, I'd like to go to all 3. It's bad for conference organizers because you're not going to get the footfall. And so the why became, well, why hasn't someone prepared this list? And the more and more I started looking into it, I found more and more, and these are in-person gigs about the business of law. It's not, New Zealand contract law or Australian
Mm.
family law or anything. It's not law specific. It is about running the business of a law firm. And so it's the kind of thing that C-suite could go to, managing partners, CTOs, anyone that is interested in the running of a law firm can go to one of these gigs. And then you start looking at where they are and what they are. And so that became a bit about why should we do it? Why is it necessary? I think it's also necessary because A, legal is changing rapidly in terms of you think about I think in my career, actually, what law conferences used to be in the 80s and what they are now. And now we're having, you know, law conferences aimed specifically at operations people, specifically at legal marketing people, specifically at law financing people. And so they seem to be getting larger. The market gets larger because they're becoming also niche, what I'm finding. And then we're talking about conferences aimed specifically at lawyer wellness.
Mm.
It's a people
Yeah.
business. So think about wellness for your people. That was probably a bit of the why and the what and why I I thought, well, it doesn't exist. People I spoke to were saying, "Oh, it's a great idea." And then I spoke to some conference organizers or some conference exhibitors, and they were saying, it'd be great if we knew when they are, because if we've got salespeople who want to go on holiday and they're booking their holiday 6, 8, 9 months in advance, we don't know when these events are because
Mm.
the dates don't get published. So that would be helpful. And then it morphed into, so we ended up with a suppliers directory. We then ended up with a speakers directory because I'm a speaker. But also, I spoke to some conference organizers and said, we don't know who the speakers are necessarily.
Mm.
We're there in the business of organizing conference. Who is at the cutting edge of a particular aspect of law that we should get into speak about at our conference? So we've created this speakers directory, and I'm delighted, obviously delighted that you're on there. But people are now saying, well, look, I've got a story to tell for legal and I want to get known. And that's great. So that's really how the figures come about. I think there's a market for it. I haven't had uh, anybody tell me it's a bad idea yet. And this is what happens when I got angry on the 12th of November when I was in the pub with my son-in-law saying, this is ridiculous. Why doesn't someone do this? And then we ended up launching it on the 29th of December. So it's a combination of me having time on my hands and getting angry and being in a pub, really. I think that's how we could say that it came about.
Yeah. And so there seems to be three main cohorts that can really benefit from having a consolidated list of these business of law conferences. Is do you think though that there is that potential for more? Like, is it geared towards like the actual delegates themselves? Is it something where the actual promoters of these conferences could derive some benefit as well?
Promoters of the conferences can derive benefit because they can push it out to a different audience. We've
Mm.
had about 1,600 people have visited in the first 2 weeks of it launching, looking at what's on and where. So
In the
there's
first week,
in the
1,600.
first 2 weeks, 1,600, and
First 2
so
weeks.
so
Wow.
that shows that
Mm.
people are curious, and actually you then start thinking, well, you know, there's a tech conference going on in Transylvania in Romania. And you might think, well, actually, I'm interested in tech. I wonder what's happening in that market. Is there anything I should go to there and learn about
Yeah.
what's going on there? Or there's a big conference in Tallinn in Estonia, and you think, well, okay. Whereas people tend to go to the same old conferences, and now I think you might think, well, actually, I will go somewhere else. I spoke at a conference in Poland last year. And
Mm.
the business language in Poland, they all spoke English. I did an event in Lithuania. The business language is English, and so all of a sudden the world gets a little bit bigger, and then you
Mm.
can actually go to events that you wouldn't necessarily have thought about 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah. Oh, I want to ask you more about that around like that whole volume point as well. Like 380 is just on the business of law is quite significant.
And that isn't anywhere near all of them. You think
No.
about the number of lawyers that there are in somewhere like India, for example. I've only got 3 gigs listed in India at the moment, and I'm chatting to lawyers out in India saying there must be more. List them.
There is, there's this well-known notion about, just before I don't know if it's true, but just before the motor car really came in, we were reaching peak horse and, London was terrified that it was going to be, you know, a meter deep in horse manure. Um, in a similar sort of way, are we reaching peak conference?
I don't think so, and I think what's happening in the same way, if you think of what the impact that AI has had on legal, okay,
Mm,
and I think I get this legal map every so often, and it started. I think 2 years ago in February there were 400 legal tech firms using AI. There's now something like 800 legal tech firms using AI. These products are being built, so I think we'll end up there perhaps being more conferences. I think people will become more discerning about what they want to go to. They become more selective, and they can do the research in advance. And you're thinking, well, what is it? Am I going to a conference for? And there's
mm,
there's one that was held in Dubai on the 9th of January. It was a paddle tennis tournament. Okay, so it's a paddle tennis tournament in Dubai. Lots of lawyers went, but actually there was networking around it, and there were
yeah.
events they could go
Okay.
to. There was a boat trip, but there was a guy doing podcast recording and things like that. But I think this is people going, well, I want to go, and there's a lot of networking. I want to forge relationships, and I
Mm.
can do it, in a different way. Another one that I've listed in Dubai the other day, it was horse riding in the desert, put on by a law firm
I think
that
I've
are
seen those ads on Instagram.
yeah, and it was, and you think, wow, this is law firms being very creative about
Yeah.
how we are going to engage with other lawyers as well and our clients by putting on things that are different. Because if we want legal education, and that's usually how law conferences came about, get our CPD points. You'd go and you'd sit and hopefully keep awake for a whole conference, and then you'd walk away with 8 CPD hours or whatever that is. I think people are time poor, so we want to use our time wisely. We can get our education in certain other ways, but now we want to go and be inspired. We want to get an idea. We want to see something in action that make us think, yeah, I can apply that in my business somehow.
I really like that idea about that possibility of law firms leveraging events that where they can co-educate with their clients. That's something I haven't seen before either. The closest I can think of is Simon Tupman here in New Zealand. He does a future firm forum, which is very much one of those location based for quite a few years. He had done it in Queenstown, and then last year it was in Taupo, and it is purposefully highly selective, always sells out because there's only 50 spots. But what's really beneficial is that both the speakers and the vendors that are sponsoring, who also have some minor speaking spots, they all get to sit amongst the crowd as well. And there's a lot of communal learning that
Mm.
happens. So seeing that, but more from the law firms would be really, really cool. And that's sort of, you've already answered the next question I had prepared on my list here about how mapping all of this helps actually both, speakers and vendors work out what is a good strategic investment, but being able to see that is that kind of where you're going with the development of Legal Gigz? Because it is still really new, right?
Absolutely. I think, when it comes to the investment, as an individual lawyer going to an event, you're investing your time, your overhead in getting there, et cetera, et cetera. So I think people will become more discerning. I think from the supplier point of view, and I went to an event it was the beginning of November of last year, where a supplier stood on a stage, put up a slide, and said, "These are the events, these are the legal gigs that I have attended as an exhibitor, and here is the ROI on each one." And he meticulously mapped the ROI on each one he went to. And he said, "This event here, I spent £14,000. ROI, 0. At this event here, I spent £6,000 and the ROI is £140,000. I'm not an exhibitor. I don't do that kind of analysis, but he did, and he was in the tech. He was in legal tech, and it was really fascinating to when you start actually really analyzing what you do. And this is a guy who, when he talks about how I act and how I present at exhibitions, I will not have a seat. I will not have a desk. I want people. I don't want to create a barrier between me and and the people at these exhibitions. And you think, well, there's a lot of logic in that, because quite often you'll go to exhibitions and there's people sitting down. The people who are there exhibiting are sitting down on their own laptops, doing their own work or eating their lunch or whatever it might be doing. And you think, oh, I'll just walk by. I was vaguely interested in that, but they seem to be having their lunch, or whatever it might be. And so he's very much into training people. And this was part of his talk, was training you how to actually work a stand, have prepared open questions, all of this kind of stuff, which is kind of it's basic sales stuff. But if you've never been in that sales environment, and then it's new to you, and that's the kind of thing. And actually networking, and you think now how often, we're communicating via tech. Lots of people just will always only ever communicate by tech. What do you do when you walk into a room and there's 500 people there? How are you gonna network? What do you say when you get standing in a conversation with someone, you're thinking, "I really need to get out of this and I need to move on," without appearing rude? All of these, things that people do need to understand how you work a conference and how you get the best out of it, I work when I speak at conferences, when I go to conferences, I will contact lots of people before I go to tell them, "Hi, I'm gonna be there.
Yeah.
Do you want to have a coffee? Is it worth having a?" I don't, because I
Many I was going to say many of the conferences now also have apps and have created like digital ecosystems to try and create that and manifest that as well, where it's see the exhibitor list, obviously with all of the consents,
yeah.
and see what other delegates are there, so you can reach out and go, oh, there's a breakout session. Are you would you be available? We can go to the coffee cart and have a chat and, go from there. I found though that those things, they don't work for me because I'm more serendipitous than that. And, end up having conversations, but that's just who I am. And I think that it's really important to have that diversity. We're going to move on for a moment because I'm going to get really tough now and ask some tough questions.
Go on.
Spicy. So I think it's important to ask, some deeper, like scratchy questions. And when it comes to developing something like this, which absolutely, like I said before, I stand by that it's something that should have existed years ago. The challenge I think that you have is that you've got something that, what did you say? It was like the 27th of November that you were in the pub with your
12th,
son-in-law?
12th of November.
12th of November. So, this thing is still wet behind the ears. It's, it's gone from a scrappy concept to a live platform incredibly quickly. 80 events listed and site visits in the first 2 weeks. Obviously, the legal profession, of which both you and I used to be members of, prizes perfectionism and is known for its risk aversion. What aspects did you have to unlearn to get this out so quickly? Like, what motivated you to get it out so quickly?
Biggest factor in getting it out quickly was because from the 12th of November, for what I do, the 12th of November, probably to the middle of January, is dead time. Nobody's having a big yellow penguin in to train their staff. We're all raring to go for Christmas. So I was at home and I was thinking, okay, I could spend
You're
time
starving off the boredom.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was then I became a bit obsessed with looking for these conferences. And when you start thinking, wow, there's 50 and oh my gosh, there's 80. I've reached 100. And then it became, I've reached 200. And then you start thinking, well, and then you start coming across events that you think are absolutely brilliant. And I can tell you that there's in the Colorado Women's Bar Association are having a wonderful conference. It looks to me where there's yoga and there's all kind of speakers and wellness. And I thought, I'd love to go to that kind of thing if I was a woman in Colorado, not necessarily in Colorado, but you think these are people doing stuff that is really interesting. And it's not come along and just get your CPD points. It's come along and actually engage with people, learn from people. And that's, I just started, thinking, well, this is really, really interesting what's going on. I like the challenge of finding more and more. I'm desperate to get it over 400. My next target is now, let's get it over 400 and see what's going on. You then come across law firm association groups, these international groups where law firms come under one brand.
Like the IIBA and...
I'm nearly up to 100 of those. And there's one specifically for legal tech lawyers. I will send you the details in case you want to put that in the show notes, bearing in mind your audience. But it's just kind of like, who knew these things were out there? And then if I could say to someone, look, this is really interesting. Here's this group here. Great. So I was driven to do it. And luckily the guy who builds my websites, he had time on his hands as well. So I can say, look, I'm going to be sending you loads of stuff. I'm not going to lie, in terms of actually creating some of the text and the research and about this and creating prompts to search for things. AI is really useful to do that kind of stuff, to drill down and stuff. You've then got to check that every conference exists, because guess what? There are scam conferences out there which are used to actually invite people to pay to present and things like that. So I had to go on every one and check every link existed and was a genuine event and things like that. But yeah, and I was quite encouraged because it's new, and that there's not
Mm.
anything like it, and people think, "Actually, Shaun, this really helped." I had so many people say to me, "Oh, yeah, I thought about doing something like this years ago, but it looked a bit hard."
Yeah.
Okay, and, and everything looks hard until you've done it, so
Well,
just
I think it's quite wonderful that you managed to find something that was fun, so it didn't feel like hard work. It was something that you always wanted to do.
yeah.
It's satisfied something. I'm really curious though, because having experience designing websites myself, which very briefly for the audience is there was a period where I helped open up a jazz bar. And which, Shaun, we were just talking about jazz. And it was when I was in the marketing team for a law firm, and I was still a practicing lawyer because they needed a practicing lawyer to check that everything that was on the law firm website was legally correct, because the entire business model was all around people using lawyer Google and then providing accurate information that would then help those people realize they can't really DIY their bail application. They should probably call the hotline. So I was the lawyer behind the scenes making sure that that was correct. And one fateful day, the big boss took the whole marketing team out for a very boozy lunch, because this was a little while ago now, but it'd be 10 years ago actually, now that I think about it. And it was still relatively normal to have boozy lunches for work. And that's when he announced to us all that he's been quite successful with the law firm, and he thanked us all very much and said, "I'm going to follow my life dream of opening up a jazz bar, and I want you guys to help me." So then I worked with the graphic designer and the web developer, because I'm not sure if you're aware that when it comes to like live venues and ticketing systems, there is a monopoly. There's very little competition. And I'm actually reading this is Divergent number 45, but hopefully my listeners know me well enough. But a great book called Choke Point Capitalism, which goes through all of that. But anyway, there's a monopoly on ticketing systems for live music venues. And so my boss at the time was hell-bent on ensuring that we had a bespoke ticketing system that he could control. So I've got a bit of familiarity with back-end systems, with that thing, because somehow that was the what I got roped into. So with all of that long story, I really, really want to know though, what is the number one ticket for you to change now that you've done this, sprint to launch? Because I know there'll be a list, but what's the number one that you're like, I need to fix this one thing, or I need to change this one thing in how it works?
What a good question. Well, probably at the moment, because we're so young, I'm not sure. I think making some of the clarity between the directories. If you want to create if you want to register as a lawyer, or if you want to just look at the website, you can do that. You haven't got to register anyway. If you want to register as a lawyer and save, in the same way that if you're on TripAdvisor or Airbnb, you can save the things I'm interested in, save them into a file. That works well, but you've got to create a profile to do that. Then you have to create a supplier profile. And then if you're a speaker, you create a speaker profile. And I think if I'd gone back I would have said, look, hang on, you might get people wanting to do all three, because you get suppliers saying, look, I'm have one where I am a sales and marketing coach. I specialize in legal, about helping business development for law firms and law. but I'm also a speaker. And there we've had to say, oh, you've got to create two profiles then. So I'd probably go back and say, oh, look, yeah, because it originally started life as an Excel spreadsheet in my head, which would be kind of automated about conferences. And then it became bigger. Then it's become, I'm thinking for phase two, well, it'd be quite nice to have a podcast directory then the law firm alliance network on there. Because I think it's fascinating what's going on in that space where you think, where are all these alliances? Who, what? And then you find that there's a law firm alliance in California that's having its conferences in London and Dublin, and you think, wow, that's going to be a good gig to go on, and learning more about other jurisdictions and going places, and maybe who knows, having a holiday at the same time. But yeah, I think if I could change anything, I would have gone back and said, right, well, we build that bit there. How do we give everybody a pathway into everything, even the areas we haven't thought of yet? But
Oh,
it is
I
what
love
it
that
is.
answer. And it is, it's one of the signs of the times with AI, and then we're all trying to combat this massive problem with these huge conglomerates around, and shitification as well, which is my favorite word and word of 2024, and because the process of it. But that whole iterative process and being so forthcoming around that, I think is really delightful and an important part of the process, because this is the listeners here are the community that you're serving with Legal Gigz, but in turn, that's the feedback and where it's so lovely to hear you're so open to that sort of feedback and pivots, because I think that's what's really important about creating something that's going to live for a long time and help serve a lot of people. And speaking of serving people, I have another tricky question. So the last one that I wanted to ask you, though, because you've already mentioned the podcast directory, which is like a little, watch this space. But I do want to find out how you are looking from a strategic point of view, ensuring that the quality of that content, as it gets bigger and bigger, and there's more and more people as well that create listings. There are vendors that create listings. There are speakers that create their own listings. How do you ensure that the quality will be there and not revert to a billboard for the highest bidder?
I think it's free to list. If you're a law firm supplier, you can create an entry for nothing. So if you're a startup, create an entry. If you want to have an enhanced entry, regardless of the size of your business, it's £300. It's cheap enough for people to say, actually, I'll take a punt on it. If I was to say to people, it's £1,000 or 1,500, whatever, they think, it's going to massively impact my marketing budget. Well, if you're setting up a business and £300 is too much of a punt, think about the viability of your business before it becomes
Yeah.
So I did toy with the idea of creating a platform, or within the platform, allowing people to review conferences and review suppliers. And then I thought, hang on, I'm going to make myself a rod for my own back here, because I'm going to have to then actually start reviewing.
Moderation.
Absolutely. And I thought, no, that could, you could get competitors slagging off each other's product. I don't want to go there. So I thought, well, if I create a wide enough platform where it's accessible to everybody, suppliers can come on board if they want to, speakers can come on board if they want to, and then ultimately, I think the market will decide, and individuals will decide what is right for them, because there will be some people who might be horrified about the thought of going to the Colorado Women Bar Association Wellness Weekend. There'll be other people who think, oh my God, that's just what I'm looking for at this moment in time. And everybody's different. What you and I value is completely different. the jazz you and I like. Might be the same. I don't know. It might be different. I'm going to give a jazz recommendation at the end. But it's
I
kind of
love
like,
that.
you know, we're all different. Let's just find what works for us, and really, Legal Gigz at least is a starting point. Go there, have a look.
It's
When
it's
we end up,
beautifully pluralistic.
thank you, thank you. I might have to put that on a t-shirt.
No, it's a it's an interesting strategy to have when you have because it's not really just the one event. So obviously the events are the centerpiece, but you're really developing three separate different, because like I can definitely see organizations looking at the list of suppliers as a who do we approach for sponsorship. So I can see how that works. So it really will become like what the quality of that content looks like, and that perspective of how you modulate that with a entry fee is one way to do it, which is great. Thank you. What we do on this show, in all my personalities, is I've got these conversation cards, and they have these lovely, lovely topics, things like, what's your go-to favorite meal, that kind of thing. Maybe
Ooh,
you will get
okay.
a jazz question, who knows? But I'm shuffling them quite poorly for everybody to see. If you're watching this online, hopefully you can hear it on the microphone, how terrible it is. And Shaun, what are 3 things you want to do or achieve in your lifetime?
Oh, blimey.
That's probably the
What
deepest
are 3
existential
things?
one we've
Gosh,
had.
well, 3 things. I want to visit Australia and New Zealand. And I will be visiting Australia later this year, and I will be, touch wood, visiting New Zealand later this year because my daughter's just moved there. So I've got to come down under. I have never been to Australia or New Zealand yet, so that's one thing. What else would I like? I'd love my golf handicap to be a little bit lower, but it's not. And this is something that I am working on. I'm wanting to go to more jazz gigs, actually, and I've signed up. Believe it, I live in the Cotswolds in the UK, and I've discovered there are so many jazz clubs popping up in towns, in market towns, in the Cotswolds, and they have some brilliant artists. And so my wife isn't such a great fan of jazz, but she humors me and comes along. And yeah, I want to listen to more. I want to see more jazz because I'm not at all musical. I can't play anything, but you see these people creating great music, and it's different. This is the thing about jazz. It will be different the next night when they do it, and I'm blown away by the musicality, the skill of these people. You see the fun they're having on stage with each other because someone's done something different that they haven't done before, and they're all playing catch up or they're engaging with it. And I just love that. It's a great thing. Oh, and the other thing that I'm a great fan of is stand-up comedy. And I love going to stand-up comedy sessions, which again, I did do a stand-up comedy training course. I did do a couple of gigs. And once you have understood the anatomy of stand-up comedy, you really, really appreciate when somebody is really good at it. The work that goes into that is immense. And there's a great book called The Zen of Stand-up Comedy, which I would encourage anybody who's thinking about doing it to read.
I love it. Well, thanks so much, Shaun. And before we wrap up, what is your jazz recommendation?
Okay. The Bill Evans Trio. If you've never listened to Bill Evans, just put it on in the background. You'll have some wonderful piano jazz in the background. I got recommended to. I'm a great fan of Jamie Cullum, and Jamie Cullum does a show in the UK, and he recommended Bill Evans' Trio a couple of years ago, and I'm just obsessed with it. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
Cheers, Shaun. I think I'm going to put that on now while I fetch myself some dinner.
Okay. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Thank you. It's been an absolute delight.